He doesn't know what he believes. And that is why it is impossible for him to articulate a coherent message to the American people.
Dude, he doesn't know what he believes. Is Trump Hitler? Is Trump daddy? I'm a never Trump guy. Trump is my guy. Oh, bro.
Because he doesn't believe it.
Dude, Shapiro is like a really good speaker, man. He really is. Dude, he just leveled him.
JD Vance just said this about you, and these are his words, quote, he compared you to a really bad impression of Barack Obama. What is your response to that?
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
That's great. Barack
Dude,
Obama was probably...
That's not a put down. Saying to somebody that you remind me of arguably one of the greatest presidents in history. Like, come on, man. She's probably picking Shapiro, don't you think? I mean, with just the comparisons to Obama and the way he speaks, he's a good speaker, man. I don't know. I kind of like him more than Tim Walz. I like Tim Walz, but there's something about Josh Shapiro that he feels like he's a little feistier than Tim Walz. Shapiro makes the most sense on paper. And I believe having somebody like Shapiro kind of allows Kamala Harris to be even more left-wing because there's this sort of balance. Whereas if you have two left-wing people on the ticket, what happens is then the tiniest bit of left-wing can get portrayed like, oh, those two f***ing radicals. But nobody's ever gonna call Josh Shapiro a radical lefty. You know what I'm saying?
It's kind of a weird insult, I guess. But look, I'll say this about JD Vance. It is real hard being honest with the American people when you're not being honest with yourself. JD Vance is a total phony baloney. He is the most inorganic candidate I think I have ever seen on the national stage. He doesn't know what he believes. And that is why it is impossible for him to articulate a coherent message to the American people.
I think that's a real problem with a lot of the Republican Party. They lack a coherent message because their message is not about a firm set of beliefs. They're reactionary. When you think about it, that's why they have a term like woke. Anything that they don't like from the other side, they just react to it. They're not operating from a firm sense of beliefs. Their beliefs are completely created on the spot as a reaction to the other side, like what's going on now. You know, how they argued for the longest time about your gender assigned at birth. And now they're like, no, this woman with woman's reproductive organs who has a vagina and has been a woman her whole life, right now, they discovered 20 years later, 30 years later, she's got a Y chromosome, so therefore she becomes a man. But like, okay, so now you're saying men can get pregnant, which 2 years ago you were adamantly against. There is no big picture. There's no coherent messaging because they're always just reacting to something. They're not driven by an actual bona fide singular school of thought or reasoning. They don't operate based on reasoning. And you're right. I think the word inorganic is actually a really good message. And like the phony baloney, you didn't think that was strong enough? Yeah, but look at Shapiro, though, dude. I think phony baloney is about as insulting as that guy's gonna get, right? He's a do-gooder, bro. Shapiro's the kind of guy who irons his boxers. That's what I think of him. I'm like, God damn, this guy is, not edgy at all, bro. He is like the anti-edgy.
That's Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro dunking hard on JD Vance without even mentioning couches in any way and demonstrating vividly why he's on the short list to be Kamala Harris's running mate. The contest to be the VP nominee, aka the Veep Stakes, are reaching their final days with the formal vetting process having reportedly been concluded, putting the decision squarely into the hands of Kamala Harris. Harris expected to meet with her top contenders in the next 72 hours. So I ask you, in the language of ESPN, who you got?
All right, here we go.
Well, you set it up right, my friend. It is sort of an intensive kind of moment where you're sort of focused in on the state of the play, and you're seeing it in a very different light than we would have in a traditional setting, even as we saw with Donald Trump, who tried to make his selection more like a form of The Apprentice. You do have a much more clarifying moment right in front of the vice president, which will make this must-see TV for sure.
Michael, who you got? Who you got?
Well, that's my way of saying, does it really matter? No, I mean, I think, look, I mean, she's got a great crop. I mean, that list that you just put up there will stand up against anything on the Republican side, meaning JD Vance.
I don't disagree with that, but if you were
Trump itself,
if she asked you for your advice, who would you say?
Probably the governor of Pennsylvania, because for me it's about strategery, and it's about how you network the pieces together to get you the ultimate goal, which is the White House. And what's the most important play? It's Pennsylvania. Yeah. The second question, if you don't want to go down that road, is okay, if not him, who gets me Pennsylvania? Because it's the largest piece in that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thinking. If they don't pick Shapiro, who gets Pennsylvania?
Christina, Michael's here alluding to the notion that there is only one of these candidates that has had a campaign of some kind run against him, and that's the sort of Genocide Josh campaign. No Genocide Josh is what it's called. It's quite small.
Yeah, see, the Genocide Josh, though, it's a very real thing. It's fucking bullshit. You know who's going to be into it? I was just reading a tweet right now. These fucking weirdo far lefties about Josh Shapiro. This guy is garbage because 13 years ago, he said something. They're going to Genocide Josh him. It's this far left people. You know it's coming. See, this is like what I wonder about. Does she just pick Shapiro and go with Pennsylvania? Because you know these people are going to fall from grace at some point. The first time aid goes to Israel, they're all going to freak out. So does she just make the move now and call their hand? They're just waiting in the wings. I saw it. They were all about getting rid of Biden, but they didn't realize the minute they got rid of Biden that, like, I'm sorry, Emma and all you far lefties, if you're going to be involved in American politics, Israel's support is always going to be on the table. America is never not going to support Israel. I don't know how you reconcile that with like living in America. Are you just going to use genocide blank? You're going to become like Donald Trump, crooked Hillary, crooked Joe Biden, you're genocide Joe, genocide Josh, genocide, and then insert name here for the rest of time? Like, what are they going to do, man? Like this guy. I watched him and I like some of his shit, Kyle Kalinske. But dude, I kind of find this bothersome though. He said he fully expected her not to pick Tim Walz, but this thing, because the Democrats never fail to let him down. Like for him, winning a fucking election is like a letdown or whatever. But he said that could be an indication it's Josh Shapiro. God, he hopes he's wrong. Trump has been attacking her as anti-Israel or idiot staffers are feeding into the delusion, blah, blah, blah. He calls Shapiro a turbo-Zionist. I don't know about that. I honestly don't think Shapiro is a turbo-Zionist. I don't really see it that way. He's a Jewish guy. A lot of Jewish people in Pennsylvania that look to him for leadership. So obviously, the October 7th thing was probably hugely traumatizing for him and those communities, experiencing their trauma and them wanting to do what's best to make their people safe while simultaneously not oppressing and destroying all the Palestinian people. I'm really curious where he stands, because I know he's been outspoken as pro-Israel. Shapiro's strong pro-Israel stance could appeal to some swing voters and mitigate Republican efforts to make support for Israel a wedge issue this election, but it could further alienate progressives who are hoping Harris charts a new path from Biden on the conflict. Some observers feel Shapiro has been wrongly singled out in a crowded field of pro-Israel candidates solely because he's Jewish. Now, see, this could be really problematic, too. We have a large group of people here that are pro-Israel. America's not going to turn their back on Israel anytime soon. We're not. It doesn't matter. Kamala Harris, doesn't matter. Even if Tim Walz was president, America would still be pro-Israel. And the problem is, though, you got to wonder, if a guy had the same vibe as Josh Shapiro, but his last name wasn't Shapiro, would these people be as adamantly against him? Okay? I do feel like that sometimes. I feel like Josh Shapiro a lot of times gets this judgment. He's automatically tagged like a Zionist or whatever simply because his last name is Shapiro. And that's not cool, man.
There's certainly tons of anti-Semitism on the right, don't get me wrong, and I've heard from them as well. But that's where this anti-Semitism is coming. The people who are saying, Hamas, we love you, or, set Tel Aviv on fire, or praising October 7th, which
that
they
shit
call
is
the
nuts.
Al-Aqsa flood. These are streets full of progressives.
And look, Jake, there are people with strongly held views and righteous views, whether you and I agree with them or not is really irrelevant here, who really fundamentally disagree with Israeli policy. They don't like the direction that things are going in the Middle East. And they should have a right.
Plenty of Israelis that feel that way. But I'm not even talking about disagreeing with Netanyahu. I'm talking about whether or not people support terrorists killing civilians.
Well, where I think that it breaks down and leaves a conversation about policy is when you engage in anti-Semitism. I also think that it's incumbent upon those who are out protesting, who are out expressing these views, to actually know some history, to actually know how we landed ourselves in this situation in the Middle East, to have thoughtful, constructive views on how to see a way forward. I'm someone who I see no nuance when it comes to a conversation about anti-Semitism. We should all be against it. I see a lot of nuance in the Middle East. I think we should have a two-state solution. I think Benjamin Netanyahu has not only been a horrible leader for Israel over many, many years, predating October 7th. He is someone who's leading Israel down a dangerous and destructive path.
Dude, right there, bro. Like, what the... This guy, the way he's sitting here, he's calling him a turbo Zionist and he's totally misrepresenting him, calling him disgusting. Now, I'm going to go on the record and say this Shapiro guy seems a little conservative for me. He's a little fuddy-duddy with the whole, protesters blocking people from going to school. But right there, he just said that he supports a two-state solution and he disavowed Netanyahu and said how he's taken Israel down the wrong path. Like, this guy is not a turbo Zionist. You know what I'm saying? That's where I get a little flummoxed by some of this view, because why is, Kyle Kalinske calling this guy a turbo Zionist? That's suspect. That makes me wonder what's really underneath it, because he didn't actually compare pro-Palestinian protesters to the KKK. He compared the people that are using the Palestinian protests to hurl anti-Semitic hate towards Jewish people and said, hey, man, if it was KKK people saying this about black people, we wouldn't be giving it a pass. So let's make sure we're not giving it a pass here with these Palestinian protests. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to dissuade from that and say that that's not a huge issue, because it is. The whole genocidal behavior that comes with capitalist, imperialist societies and military powers, the pillaging of Africa and taking all their natural resources, like what driving an EV is doing to Africa right now, ethnic cleansings that have occurred in the Middle East and in Central Africa. And the fact of the matter is we've never done anything about it. And I get that we're starting to have a conscience about this. But what I don't like is when you start holding individual politicians responsible for a greater societal thing. You know what I mean? I just don't like it when we start having a collective conscience about the horrors of the world, and then we start taking singular people in American government and lumping all the responsibility on them. We're all feeding into this global hierarchy of imperialism and power seeking. And I have trouble when you take, Josh Shapiro and say that it's his fault.
It's also the case that some on the left are putting pressure on Kamala Harris to not pick him.
Yeah, see, it's going to be really interesting, because I don't think this far left group is they're not the biggest part of the Democratic Party, but they're loud. You know what I'm saying? They're loud.